Imagine this. Your mailbox gets smashed by cops every week, and you're fed up. Instead of just fixing it, one rancher decided to level up with a trap that would leave them speechless. Find out how he turned frustration into the ultimate revenge. Jake had always enjoyed the quiet life of a rancher. His small farm sat just outside town, nestled among the hills where the only sounds were the rustling of trees and the occasional chirp of crickets. His days were simple and routine, tending to the animals, working the land, and checking his mailbox for letters or packages. But for some strange reason, his mailbox had become a point of constant frustration. The mailbox was located just off the gravel road, placed in the same spot for years. Every week, without fail, a police patrol car would sit by his place, and in the blink of an eye, his mailbox would be knocked over again. It wasn't just an accident anymore. It felt like an inevitability. The loud thud as it hit the ground had become so predictable that Jake could almost set his watch by it. He couldn't understand why it kept happening. It wasn't a busy road, and the officers knew the area. Still, it seemed like no matter what, they couldn't avoid running over his poor mailbox. The problem became so frequent that Jake found himself dreading the sound of an approaching patrol car. Jake's mailbox wasn't just a practical object. It had been there for years, passed down from his grandfather. It was one of those old-fashioned wooden boxes with the flag on the side and a solid metal post. It was sturdy, simple, and as much a part of his home as the barn or the fences that lined the property. But now, it had become a symbol of frustration. Each time it was hit, Jake would pick it up, hammer it back into place, and go on with his day. But it started to feel like a pointless cycle. Jake tried to be understanding at first. He knew the police were just doing their jobs, patrolling the area, and he figured maybe they were distracted. But after the fifth or sixth time his mailbox was destroyed, his patience began to wear thin. It wasn't just the damage to his property, it was the blatant disregard for something that mattered to him. Each time it happened, Jake felt a little more disrespected. He had tried everything, putting up warning signs, even talking to the officers when they were parked in town. But nothing seemed to make a difference. The more Jake thought about it, the more it bothered him. The officers weren't speeding down the road in a hurry. They were just oblivious. It didn't seem like they were even trying to avoid the mailbox. It was as if they didn't care, and that was the part that got to him. It wasn't just a piece of wood or metal. It was a symbol of his small, quiet life, and every time it was hit, it felt like a little part of that life was being bulldozed. Jake had tried to keep his temper in check, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to let it slide. One evening, after yet another wrecked mailbox, Jake reached his breaking point. He had just finished repairing it again, and as he stood there looking at the crumpled mess, he made a decision. This time, he wasn't going to just fix it. He was going to make a change that would force the officers to take notice. Jake wasn't a man who looked for confrontation, but he was tired of being disrespected. That night, he went to his workshop with a clear idea in mind. If the officers weren't going to slow down and respect his mailbox, then he'd build one they would never see coming. Over the next few hours, Jake put together a strange contraption. He had always been handy with tools, and he'd learned from his grandfather how to build things that lasted. But this mailbox wasn't going to just be built to last, it was going to be built to send a message. Jake's design was a combination of ingenuity and mischief. He reinforced the structure with extra metal, attached springs to the base, and included a hidden compartment designed to spring a harmless foam explosion into the air when the mailbox was hit. It wasn't dangerous, but it would certainly get someone's attention. He could already imagine the look on the officer's face when the mailbox went off. He'd had enough of being run over. By morning, the new mailbox was in place. It looked like a regular, if slightly sturdier, mailbox from the outside. But Jake knew the truth. It was a carefully crafted trap. And now, he just had to wait for the police to come by again. The next day, Jake was sitting on his porch, enjoying a cup of coffee and waiting for the inevitable. It wasn't long before he heard the rumbling of a patrol car approaching. Jake stood up, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. He watched as the car sped down the road toward his mailbox. As the officer got closer, Jake's heart raced in anticipation. He knew what was coming next. Just as the car reached the mailbox, the mechanism triggered. A loud pop rang out, followed by a cloud of foam bursting into the air just above the patrol car. The officer slammed on the brakes, startled, and looked around in confusion. The foam had splattered everywhere, coating the car and the road. The officer sat there for a moment, stunned, trying to figure out what had just happened. Jake still hidden behind the barn, couldn't help but laugh. He had done it. The mailbox had finally sent a message. The officer climbed out of the car, wiping foam off his uniform, and began to look around for the source of the prank. But Jake remained hidden, savoring the moment. He knew it wasn't going to end there. The officer would probably come back, angry, demanding answers. But now, Jake felt a sense of victory. True to Jake's expectations, the officer returned to the ranch the next day. This time, he was not alone. A second patrol coupled up, and Jake could see the officer who had hit his mailbox getting out, his face red with frustration. The two officers walked toward Jake's porch, their steps heavy with the weight of their confusion and annoyance. "Mr. Jake," the officer said, trying to keep his voice steady, "what in the world was that about?" He gestured toward the mailbox, which was now intact, its foam residue still visible on the road. "You could have caused an accident with that stunt." Jake stood up from his chair and looked the officer in the eye. "I'm not trying to cause trouble, officer." "But I've had enough of this," he said, pointing to the damaged mailbox. "This mailbox isn't just a piece of wood to me. It's a part of my life. And every time you guys run over it, it's like you're running over my respect. So I decided to do something about it." The officer scowled, but Jake could tell he was taken aback by the seriousness in his tone. "It was a harmless joke, officer," Jake added, his voice steady. "But it's time we started respecting the people who live around here. You speed down this road without thinking, and you don't even bother to slow down for something as small as a mailbox." There was a long pause. The officer looked at Jake, his expression softening. "You're right," he said finally. "We'll slow down from now on, and I'll make sure the rest of the department gets the message too." Jake nodded. It wasn't about the foam or the prank anymore. It was about ensuring that people like him, who lived on the outskirts, weren't forgotten or treated with disregard. In the following weeks, the change was noticeable. The police patrol cars started slowing down as they passed Jake's ranch. They no longer sped by, oblivious to the dangers of the winding road. Jake rebuilt his mailbox this time with a sturdier, reinforced post that could withstand anything the road threw at it. But it wasn't just about the mailbox anymore. It was about the respect that had been regained. Jake's interaction with the officers became more cordial. They waved when they passed by, and Jake occasionally saw them slowing down even more than necessary. The mailbox stood proudly by the road, untouched for the first time in months. It was a small victory, but it was one that meant a lot. The new mailbox remained undisturbed, its sturdy frame standing tall against the elements. Every time Jake looked at it, he was reminded of how a simple act of ingenuity had changed the way his community viewed him. The officers, no longer reckless or dismissive, had learned to slow down and show respect. Jake had transformed his frustration into a powerful message, and in the process, he had reminded everyone that sometimes it's the little things that matter most. And whenever Jake walked past that mailbox, a quiet sense of pride filled him. He had won not just for himself, but for anyone who valued respect, even in the smallest, simplest things.